You are standing in the blazing Roman sun outside the massive arches of the Colosseum, your toga already soaked with sweat, watching as 50,000 desperate Romans surge toward 80 numbered gates like water through a broken dam. The acrid stench of unwashed bodies mingles with a metallic taste of fear in the air as you clutch your tessera, that precious pottery shard that determines whether you will witness the games in comfort or spend the day crushed against strangers in the suffocating darkness of the upper tiers. What you are about to discover will shatter everything you thought you knew about fairness in ancient Rome, because getting a good seat at the Colosseum was never about money, never about arriving early, and certainly never about luck. It was about a system so ruthlessly hierarchical, so brutally designed to humiliate and separate, that it would make modern social media algorithms look like children's games. The year is 80 AD, and Emperor Titus is about to dedicate this architectural marvel with a spectacle that will last 100 days and consume the lives of 5,000 gladiators. Rome's 1 million inhabitants are competing for those coveted seats, but the game was rigged from the moment the first stone was laid. This was not entertainment. It was social engineering on a massive scale, a machine designed to reinforce every cruel hierarchy that kept Roman society functioning. The architects did not build an amphitheater. They built a monument to inequality, where your worth as a human being was literally carved in marble and measured in the distance between your seat and the arena floor. Before diving into these forgotten stories of survival and manipulation, if you enjoy learning about the hidden truths of history, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content like this. And please comment below to let me know where you're listening from. I find it incredible that we are exploring these ancient stories together from different parts of the world, connected across time and space by our shared curiosity about the past. The tessera system was not a ticket system. It was a public humiliation device disguised as crowd control. These pottery shards, or lead tokens, contained 3 numbers that sealed your fate: cuneus, gradus, and locus, sector, row, and seat. But the numbers themselves told a story of systematic degradation that would follow you from the moment you approached the Colosseum until the moment you stumbled home, exhausted and marked by your social station. The wealthy elites received engraved invitations on precious metals, while slaves and the poor got broken pottery shards, often literally fragments of discarded vessels, their rough edges cutting into palms already calloused from manual labor. Your tessera was not just your ticket, it was your social death certificate, announcing to every person you encountered exactly how little the empire valued your existence. The distribution system reveals the true horror of Roman social mechanics. Tesserae were never sold to the general public because the games were supposedly free, but this freedom was the cruelest lie ever perpetrated on the Roman people. Blocks of tickets were distributed to senators, wealthy patrons, guild leaders, and religious authorities who controlled them like feudal lords controlling land grants. If you wanted to attend the games, you did not buy a ticket, you begged for one. You degraded yourself before a patron, performed favors that were never spoken of in polite society, and accepted whatever scraps of seats they deemed appropriate for someone of your station. The wealthy could distribute premium seats to their clients and friends while relegating their enemies to the wooden benches in the atmospheric darkness of the highest tiers. Augustus himself codified this nightmare into law with the Lex Julia Theatralis, a piece of legislation that sounds bureaucratic but was actually a masterpiece of social control. The law mandated that every public spectacle must reflect the rigid hierarchy of Roman society, but it went further than simple seating arrangements. Augustus separated soldiers from civilians, married men from bachelors, children from adults, and most significantly, he banished women to the highest rows where they had previously sat with their families. This was not about order, it was about power, about making sure that every Roman citizen understood their exact place in the social ecosystem with mathematical precision. The podium level, closest to the arena, was reserved for the emperor, senators, and vestal virgins. But what the historical records rarely mention is the psychological theater that played out in these marble terraces. Senators brought their own chairs, elaborate contraptions carried by teams of slaves who would position them for optimal viewing angles and shade coverage. These were not simple seats. They were portable thrones designed to display wealth and status to the 50,000 spectators above them. Each senator's name was carved into the marble, not for convenience, but as a permanent reminder of the social order. Some of these inscriptions survived into the 6th century, suggesting that families paid enormous sums to maintain their seating rights across generations, turning prime Colosseum real estate into hereditary property. But the real genius of the system was not in rewarding the wealthy. It was in the systematic degradation of everyone else. The Minianum Primum, reserved for the equestrian class, consisted of marble seats without back support, forcing these wealthy but non-senatorial Romans to endure hours of discomfort while watching their social superiors recline in cushioned chairs below them. This was not an oversight in architectural design. It was a deliberate reminder that wealth without noble birth meant nothing in the Roman hierarchy. Knights who had accumulated fortunes through trade or military service found themselves sitting on hard marble, their backs aching, while senators lounged in comfort mere meters away. The Minianum Secundum revealed even more devastating social distinctions. This section was divided into 2 parts: the lower area for wealthy plebeians and the upper section for poor citizens. But these divisions were not based on income alone. They were based on reputation, moral standing, and political reliability. Bankrupts, regardless of their previous wealth, were forced to sit with the urban poor. Citizens who had been involved in scandals, who had divorced controversially, or who had simply fallen out of favor with local magistrates found themselves relegated to wooden benches that splintered under the weight of packed bodies. The message was clear. In Rome, your past mistakes followed you into every public space, marking you as surely as a brand. The highest section, the Minianum Secundum in Lignius, was perhaps the most psychologically cruel space in the entire structure. Here, slaves, women, and the desperately poor stood on wooden planks 50 meters from the action, unable to see details of the combat, straining to hear the roar of lions over the crowd noise. But this was not the worst part. These spectators were not given individual spaces. They were packed together like cargo in a ship's hold, forced to stand for hours in semi-darkness while the wealthy below them enjoyed personal service from attendant slaves. Women, regardless of their family's wealth or status, were confined to this section after Augustus's reforms, transforming what had been a family entertainment into a tool of gender oppression. The engineering that made this social segregation possible was itself a marvel of control technology. The Colosseum featured 80 numbered entrances, each corresponding to specific seating sections, creating a human sorting machine that processed 50,000 people in approximately 15 minutes. But this efficiency came at a psychological cost that modern crowd control experts are only beginning to understand. Romans did not simply enter a building. They were processed through a system designed to remind them of their social rank at every turn. The numbered arches, painted in bright red for visibility, serve as public checkpoints where tessera was inspected not once, but multiple times, ensuring that everyone could see exactly which entrance you were using and therefore exactly where you belonged in the social hierarchy. The vomitoria, those passages that efficiently moved crowds to their seats, were not neutral walkways, but carefully designed spaces of social reinforcement. Different levels had different architectural details, different quality of stonework, different lighting conditions. Walking through the passages reserved for the upper classes was an experience of marble and fine craftsmanship, while the routes to the higher sections were deliberately crude, unfinished, designed to make occupants feel their low status before they even reached their seats. The very act of finding your seat became a journey through the Roman class system, each step reminding you of your place in the empire's social machine. Dress codes added another layer of humiliation to the seating system. Citizens in the lower sections were required to wear togas, those heavy woolen garments that cost a fortune to maintain and were nearly impossible to clean. Poor Romans who could not afford proper toga maintenance were automatically excluded from better seating areas, creating a visual spectacle where wealth was literally worn on the body. The poet Martial recorded the story of Horatius, a poor man who attended the games in dark clothing and was relegated to the upper sections until a snow shower turned his clothes white, temporarily granting him visual equality with the wealthy spectators below. This anecdote, preserved for posterity, reveals how Romans understood that their seating system was not about order, but about maintaining visible inequality. The patronage system that controlled ticket distribution created a parallel economy of favors, humiliation, and social debt that extended far beyond the games themselves. Wealthy Romans used their allocations of premium seats as tools of political control, rewarding supporters and punishing enemies with mathematical precision. A senator might distribute choice seats to his clients during important votes, ensuring their loyalty, while relegating political opponents to sections where they would be seen associating with the urban poor. This was not subtle politics, it was public degradation disguised as entertainment. The games became a theater where political relationships were displayed for the entire city to observe and interpret. Foreign dignitaries and ambassadors were assigned special seats near the imperial box, but this honor came with its own form of psychological manipulation. These visitors were forced to watch Roman military superiority displayed through gladiatorial combat and exotic animal hunts, often featuring creatures and prisoners from their own regions. Imagine Germanic tribal leaders watching their countrymen torn apart by lions, or Egyptian officials observing crocodiles from the Nile being slaughtered for Roman entertainment. The seating arrangement ensured that these diplomatic guests had perfect views of Rome's power while being surrounded by Roman officials who monitored their reactions carefully. The religious colleges and guilds received dedicated seating sections, but these areas functioned as professional surveillance zones where members were observed by their colleagues and superiors throughout the games. Guild members could not simply enjoy the spectacle. They were performing their social roles for hours at a time, maintaining appropriate reactions, demonstrating proper loyalty to their organizations. A baker who showed insufficient enthusiasm for imperial gladiators might find his guild membership questioned. A priest who appeared bored during religious ceremonies might lose his position. The Colosseum seating system transformed entertainment into a massive performance review where 50,000 Romans evaluated each other's political and social reliability. Children from noble families attended with their tutors in special sections, but this was not a pleasant educational experience. These young Romans were being systematically trained to accept and perpetuate the social hierarchies they observed. They learned that proximity to violence correlated with social status, that the suffering of others was acceptable entertainment if you belonged to the right class, and that their future positions in society would be determined by their ability to navigate and enforce these same brutal distinctions. The Colosseum served as a finishing school for inequality, teaching each generation that human worth could be measured in marble steps and seating distances. The manipulation extended to the games themselves, where seating position determined not just what you could see, but how you were expected to react. Those in the premium seats were provided with cushions, refreshments, and even personal shade from attendant slaves, allowing them to maintain dignity and comfort while observing suffering below. The poor, crammed into standing sections, were denied food and water during the spectacles, ensuring that their experience was physically demanding and psychologically destabilizing. By the end of a full day of games, social distinctions have been literally inscribed on the bodies of spectators through comfort, exhaustion, hunger, and exposure. The black market that inevitably developed around tessera distribution reveals the true desperation created by this system. Although the games were theoretically free, wealthy Romans regularly purchased better seating positions from corrupt officials, guild leaders who sold tickets meant for their members, and religious authorities who treated their allocations as personal income sources. The poet Juvenal complained that Roman citizens would trade their voting rights for theater tickets, highlighting how the entertainment system was corrupting the very foundations of republican government. The Colosseum was not just reflecting social inequality, it was actively creating and reinforcing it through systematic exclusion and humiliation. The psychological impact of this seating system extended far beyond the games themselves, creating lasting trauma in the Roman population that historians are only beginning to recognize. Citizens who were repeatedly forced into humiliating seating positions developed what we might now recognize as symptoms of chronic social stress. Anxiety about public appearances, obsessive concern with status markers, and deep resentment toward those in higher social positions. The Colosseum was not entertaining the Roman people. It was systematically traumatizing them, creating a population that was simultaneously fascinated by and terrified of their own social system. Modern archaeological evidence has revealed the extent to which the seating system shaped Roman family relationships and social networks. Families were deliberately separated by the seating rules, with women banished to the upper sections while their husbands and male relatives sat in areas determined by their wealth and status. Children were removed from their parents and grouped with their tutors and peers, destroying family bonds during what should have been shared entertainment experiences. The Colosseum was not bringing Romans together. It was systematically fragmenting their most basic social relationships in service of imperial hierarchy. The most disturbing aspect of the seating system was its normalization of human degradation as public entertainment. Romans in the premium seats were not just watching gladiatorial combat. They were watching fellow citizens being humiliated by the seating system itself. The spectacle began the moment people entered the building and continued throughout the day as spectators observed who sat where, who had been elevated or demoted since the last games, who had fallen from favor with their patrons. The real entertainment was not the violence in the arena, it was the social violence being perpetrated in the stands. The Colosseum's seating system created a surveillance state disguised as entertainment architecture. Every seat was visible from multiple angles, ensuring that no spectator could hide their reactions, their companions, or their level of enthusiasm for imperial spectacles. Romans attended the games knowing they were being watched and evaluated by their peers, their superiors, and imperial officials who used seating arrangements to identify potential threats to the regime. The building itself became a massive intelligence-gathering operation where political loyalty was measured through seating positions and behavioral observations. The engineering marvels that made the seating system possible required massive human suffering to construct and maintain. The building consumed over 100,000 cubic meters of travertine stone, quarried by slaves and transported by forced labor. But more significantly, the intricate seating arrangements required constant maintenance by armies of workers who cleaned, repaired, and modified the sections based on changing social hierarchies. The Colosseum was not just a monument to Roman engineering. It was a monument to the empire's ability to organize human suffering on an industrial scale. The legacy of the Colosseum seating system extended far beyond ancient Rome, establishing patterns of social segregation that influenced arena design for nearly 2 millennia. Modern sports stadiums still reflect the basic hierarchy of the Roman system: luxury boxes for the wealthy, premium seating for the middle class, and general admission areas for everyone else. The psychological principles pioneered in the Colosseum, using architecture to reinforce social distinctions and create feelings of inferiority and aspiration, continue to shape public spaces around the world. Contemporary Romans understood exactly what was being done to them, but felt powerless to resist a system that had been codified into law and reinforced through daily public humiliation. The satirist Juvenal captured this awareness in his bitter observation that the people had abandoned political engagement in exchange for bread and circuses, but his critique missed the deeper truth. Romans had not chosen entertainment over politics. They had been systematically trained to accept political powerlessness through entertainment architecture that reinforced their inferior status every time they attended public events. The Colosseum seating system represents one of history's most successful experiments in social control, demonstrating how architecture can be weaponized to maintain political stability through systematic humiliation and psychological manipulation. The building did not just host spectacles, it was the spectacle, a massive theater where the real performance was the daily reenactment of Roman social hierarchy. Every time 50,000 Romans found their assigned seats, They were participating in a ritual that reinforced their acceptance of inequality, their willingness to endure humiliation for fleeting moments of entertainment, and their inability to imagine alternatives to the imperial system that controlled their lives. As you stand here today among the ruins, looking up at the crumbling arches where those red-painted numbers once guided Romans to their designated positions in the social hierarchy, remember that these stones witnessed not just gladiatorial combat, but the systematic destruction of human dignity on a scale that makes modern injustices seem almost quaint by comparison. The Colosseum was never about entertainment. It was about creating a population so traumatized by their own social system that they would accept any level of political oppression rather than risk losing their assigned place in the brutal hierarchy that had become their entire world. The games have ended, but the seating chart remains carved into the stone, a permanent reminder of humanity's capacity to transform architectural genius into instruments of psychological